Друзья, мы начинаем. Пожалуйста, кто еще не присел, кто еще все-таки хочет послушать Леонардо, человека из Венесуэлы, но человек, который проживает уже 3 с лишним года в России и планирует и в дальнейшем здесь остаться. Вот. Крайне интересно, я на самом деле недавно узнал о нем, прочитал крайне интересную заметку в афише о том, как вообще он попал сюда, каким образом все это сложилось. Я думаю, он немного об этом расскажет. Я буду переводить, как могу, все, что говорит Лео. Ну, я надеюсь, что мы справимся. Давайте поприветствуем нашего гостя.
Окей. Мой первый вопрос. Я чуть-чуть говорю по-русски, но не очень. Вы по-английски говорите? Типа того или нет? 0? Кто, пожалуйста? Окей, смотрите. Много людей по-английски говорит. И я думаю, я иду по-английски. Много, что я буду говорить, вы, наверное, уже знаете. И это все мой русский. Закончился. So, okay guys, so I will go in English. Fine? It's fine? Yeah? If you have any questions, maybe we stop and you can tell me, what the freaking, what's that? And we can translate, okay?
Да, не стесняйтесь, прям тормозите, если что, буду стараться поддерживать его.
Alright, so I was asked to talk to you about microphones and how to choose the right microphone. The first time I was told to talk to you was about home studios, and then we expanded it in general to microphones. So I want to talk to you about several things because microphones are a very important part of the recording studio, obviously. And in order to do this, I will talk to you a little bit about myself. We're going to talk about some concepts that I consider very important. We're going to talk a little bit about what's the history of mics and how they came here. Mic types, we'll talk about polar patterns too. And we will enter into the matrix a little bit. I will explain you what I mean. And then we will talk about myths and things that I have found in my experience. Then we will have a discussion about everything. Am I going too fast, or you guys are comfy? Everything cool? Yeah? Sweet. So, a little introduction to Leo. So, I made it in 1985 to this planet. I went to a musical high school in Venezuela, where I learned to play French horn. I had a super cool brat cousin who was, I have him, he's still alive thankfully. He's a great music producer, and he built a studio in Venezuela, where I grew up. And so I worked from a very little age. I entered into the recording world and music world. But, like many of you, I studied a degree in economics, actually. And I graduated as a bachelor's and master's in economics. And I worked in many jobs in economics. I was 7 years of my life, like crunching numbers and stuff, and always playing in bands, and then coming the next day to work, like, I hate this, but I have to live. And eventually, thanks to the help of my family, and also thanks to my very hard work, I made a transition in my life, and now I run a studio. So I had a rock girlfriend in high school, so that really drove me into contemporary music, because I wanted to impress her when I was very young. You know, I was like, yeah. And then that really got me into it as a coincidence for another personal reason that maybe one day I'll discuss with you with some beers. And then I joined my first band in 1998, so I have been playing in bands since 1998. And I started working as a runner in both live and studio in 2004. And then I moved to England, where I studied sound engineering and music too. And nowadays, yeah, by the way, this slide is cut. So after my studies in London, I met my wife, who is Russian, and I moved to Russia. And in here, I co-run a recording studio, and I also work as drum tech and computer tech for Zemfira. So I have released 60 releases as an engineer, and I don't claim to be an expert about what I'm going to talk to you about, because this is a very deep science, and it will be irresponsible of me to tell you that I am an expert on this, but I have some experience. I have worked in 4 recording studios, and I have met a lot of people and listened a lot. And so I want to talk to you about mics and how complicated they are. That's why I made this presentation. So we will talk some technical details, but it's important to talk about them because this should not be taken lightly. So let's go in.
Ребят, все в порядке, все спают, или все-таки как бы нужно... Если
Все
нужно,
супер.
прям, да, окей, все, let's go.
Okay, 1 second, because this, the slides are looking weird here. And I don't know how to fix it. So, I'm just gonna go. They're cut down there for some reason, but I think we're gonna be fine. So we need to understand something. Microphones are devices that are designed to convert energy from one type to another. What kind of energy do you think they convert? Acoustic, maybe I heard, to electric, maybe I heard, something like that. In order to understand them, we need to think about how sound works, how electricity works, how magnetic fields works, how sound waves work, how electromagnetic waves work, how electric conductivity happens, and what are transducers in the end. So, in a point, we understood that we needed to convert energy from one state to the other. And there are hundreds of kinds of these. A speaker is a transducer, a device that measures chemical elements, weight. It's also a transducer. We use this for a lot of things. But in our purpose, we created a device to convert acoustic energy to electrical energy. And this is quite complicated. So what I want you to understand from this first point I'm introducing is that a microphone is made with very special metals and materials. So the electricity runs very nicely there. You all follow me there? So I'm saying all this because when you guys think about which mic are you going to buy, you need to understand that a mic is a very complicated device. So whatever microphone that you will buy for your home studio will not be the best mic you can ever buy. It will be something that you're going to use for a while. But microphones are very intricate and complicated, and they are not so straightforward. It's not like the most expensive mic is the best mic in the world. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. And the microphones are designed to understand the acoustic properties of how sound propagates and to play with that, so they can give us several, let's say, points in our advantage. So, kind of how we ended up having microphones is actually an interesting question. At the beginning, we were using a loudspeaker, just a loud cone to amplify voice, but this is an acoustic instrument. It doesn't convert the energy to electrical energy, so you cannot send that energy somewhere else, like you can do thanks to a microphone. And so, I think you will have access to these slides. I was not planning to go through like straight every single point, but I wanted just to kind of tell you that first, somebody in Germany in the 1660s, excuse me, started using a little, you have used it in your childhood, a little cone connected with a line to another cone, and that was the first actual way of transmitting energy with a different medium that was not air, acoustic energy that was through a different medium that is not air. And like this, we started innovating because we wanted to have telephones. So in the 1800s, there was a race to kind of create the first commercial telephone, and Thomas Edison obtained the patent and eventually perfected it. That is called a carbon microphone, what he developed, and we will talk about it in a sec. And in 1910, so you can have an idea, it was the first ever broadcast. And you must understand that the history of microphones is also the history of sound recording, so it's actually very interesting. Without mics, you cannot record, right? And all of this came out of the necessity of transmit voice at long distances. And eventually people were like, oh man, we can transmit music, sweet, let's do it. And so we started using microphones in that way. And so you all kind of know, yeah, there is dynamic mics, condenser mics, and ribbon mics, right? You all know this. I want you to understand a little bit of what's the difference between them. And it's actually not so hard. A dynamic mic has a, I'm going to be very simplistic and use very rough terms, but I think we can all do bigger research if you want to go deeper into this topic, but there are a couple of things I want you to understand. A dynamic mic has a piece of magnet moving. So by default, a dynamic mic is a little bit, you can think about it as slower as a condenser mic. And it has some implications. Also, a dynamic mic is more strong, more robust. It doesn't damage it so easily. A condenser mic, on the other hand, it takes two plates of metal put very close to each other. And so there is not like a big magneto moving. So there is a plate which has a bigger surface area too, or not, because it can be built smaller depending on the mic. But you must understand about condenser mics that they are a bit faster. I think it's important to understand. Do you understand what I say when I say that? Can you visualize it? Cool. And then ribbon mics are a bit variation of dynamic mics. They're also kind of dynamic mics, but they work a little bit different. They have a long plate of metal, it's electrified, and that plate has two magnetos on the side, and so the vibration of this plate is picked up, creates a differential in those magnetos, and creates an electrical signal. So in between all of, well, and let's talk a little bit about it, they're a bit faster than dynamic mics as well. They tend to have a longer surface area. They catch the belly of things a little bit better. And also, it's a different technology, and so it can be very versatile instrument. But when I'm running my studio, by the way, I want you to know something. There are millions of other types of mics. You will be impressed if you do a research about it. There are even laser mics, interferometer mics, there are atomic mics, there are almost everything you can think of. There are piezo mics, which are actually quite cool. There are crystal mics made of a crystal that when it vibrates, it sends an electrical signal too. And they have applications to studio as well. I have used them in studios and it's really nice. Fiber optic, electret, contact mics, crystal mics. It's a really long list and it's a really fascinating topic. But so going a little bit into the point of this talk, because the point of this talk is like, how do you choose a correct mic? Well, when you run a studio, let's separate this into home studio, a professional commercial studio. Home studio, listen, whatever your budget can buy is fine. That's why I'm not even talking about it. Because in the end, yeah, of course, if you buy a sweet Neumann U87 or you buy a SM58 for your home studio, that's all fine. In the end, I believe that home projects should be taken to a recording studio in a point. Maybe for vocals at least. But so that's why I'm kind of not talking about that. I'm telling you as a studio owner, what do I think when I buy a mic? So what have I said so far until now? Well, that mics are complicated, that metals, that all of this includes understanding electricity, how electricity moves around things, right? And different kinds of metals are better or worse kinds of conductors of electricity. So if you have something that is running through silver, it's the amount of electricity that goes through that line, it's a lot more than if you run it through copper. So that's why mics start becoming expensive. Not only that's why, because there is a big cost in the design of this, because it's a very complicated technology. So when I'm a studio owner and I want to have some mics, what do I want? I want to have a lot. That's what I want. That's the reality. I want to have as many mics as I can. Because, you know, I want to tell you an anecdote. Do you know the album Nevermind by Nirvana? Yeah, of course you know. Right. Obviously. And maybe you remember the song Polly. Polly wants a cracker, right? So if you have ever seen the presentation, the classic albums by VH1 classic albums program about this, by the way, have any of you seen this? There is a program called Classic Albums done by VH1, and they did it about several albums. Have you ever seen this or not? It's sweet. There is a Radiohead one, there is a Jimi Hendrix one, there is a Nirvana one, and then they talk about the song Polly in this program, and they tell you that Polly was recorded like 8 times with different microphone techniques in different positions, and they were always not happy with the result. And one day, Kurt Cobain was laying on the sofa of the studio, and Butch Vig tells the story that he thought, man, I'm going to record this through the talkback mic of the studio. And he just told to Kurt Cobain, don't move, man. He brought some mics, put to record also the talkback mic of the console, and that's now when you hear it again, you will notice this. You will see that it's a very low-fi recording. You will also hear Kurt Cobain making a mistake, by the way. He starts a verse and he said, Pauline said, and then he stops, and then he sings, because it was a mistake. And this tells you a lot about myths, bullshit, and no bullshit of sound, man. Sound, the most important thing is to experiment, learn, and use different things. So I'm not here gonna give you a cathedra of which mics you should buy. I want you to understand that mics are tools, and that you should have a lot of them when you have the possibility, and starting from non-expensive to expensive ones. So back to this topic. I'm a studio owner and I want to buy some mics. What do I think about? Well, I need dynamic mics. Why do I need dynamic mics? Because, for example, they hold a higher pressure level. They are more strong. So you drop a Mali there in that mic, and you're gonna get a nice response. But maybe you put a condenser mic and you burn it. Because the whole plague of it is like, dude, this is so heavy, I cannot hear it. And a ribbon mic too. So, you see, you find yourself in a situation when you kind of need them all. Why do I need a condenser? Well, because condensers are more smooth, more bright, more fast. Why do I need a ribbon? Because there is something you must understand too. When you see fashion, the fashion industry of clothes, and you look at people walking in the catwalk, you see trends, right? And you can see, oh, that's so 80s. And it still remains until this day. Well, the same is with sound. We are accustomed to some sounds, you know, and honestly, all those old recordings from the analytical, scientific point of view of the present, they sound like shit, but we love them because we're used to them. And they sound like shit because the technology was worse. The recording medium technology was worse, not the mics. So that's another conversation, but I think you get the point. So, once again, recapping, you know, we want a lot of mics, and we want them to be different, so we can do different stuff with them. I think you cannot see very well this from there, it's a bit far away. But you need to understand something. Mics, let's put ourselves in a live situation right now of a concert, and I have some speakers blasting from the floor to me, and I'm singing. Wouldn't it be nice for the sound engineer that this mic would cancel what is coming from there? It would be really nice, because you have the monitoring coming in here, and it's going to end up in this mix, which, let's say that your singer is Emphita, which doesn't sing so loud, so you have to drive that shit very hard. And then you have this, okay, so you get the point. So inside this device, if I would open it now, can I open it? Oh, you cannot see it. There is actually electronics and circuitry, what is in there, a little computer. And so that part of the mic is very important, and you can do a lot of it with that, because just like we can do computers with electronics, you can also grab a signal of audio and say, well, I want a phase related with this so we can cancel what comes from behind. And you can achieve this by two ways, by electronic circuit inside, or by very cleverly putting magnetos in the right way in the mic. That's why, for example, SM57, it's a cardioid mic without having electronics inside. But when you see that there is like this Neumann mic that you can change different polar patterns, it's because that's happening in the circuitry inside. It's not happening in the actual capsule. So, why do I mention this? Because when you want to choose a mic, you also want to think about where is that mic is going to be in the studio and what it's going to be doing. Because we all need to understand already, by this point, that when sound travels in a room, it comes back to the source, right? And if it arrives at a different phase, we lose some information. So wouldn't it be nice if let's say, my overheads, and that is something that one has to think about. For example, I record a lot of live sessions in the studio, and if I have an amp there, I want a cardioid mic putting the back of it to the amp, so I get some cancellations from there. So these are tools that we can play with. If I want a figure of 8 mic, well, actually we should talk about that first. I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's talk about something 1 second. With this clever electronics, we can do some very cool things. And one of them is to make a mic to listen like this. So we have also figure of 8, and we have also a way to hear in a sphere. So as you can imagine, all of these things are useful. So when I use a correct mic, when I'm choosing, a mic to my studio, what am I thinking? Well, where is that mic is going to be? What's the polar pattern? Which polar patterns I already have? Do I have a hypocardioid mic? Do I have an omni mic already? So you're getting the picture. It's all interconnected. So in this slide, I kind of wanted to take us away for a second and to start thinking about a couple of other things. Until now, we understand that you can have different kinds of mics, and those mics can have different polar patterns, so they can be configured to make things for you. And these are all parts of the question. And considering the time I have, that I'm seeing that I have, I'm going to skip a couple of points here. But I want you to notice that I wrote something that says Vashno there. And what I wanted to say with that is that the materials with which mics are made, I already said it a couple of times, are super important. So that's why mics are expensive, and you will never get away from that, period. So your super cheap mic that was promised to you amazing stuff, it will just not do it, because it's not possible physically. But, like in the example I told you of Poly, aesthetically, sometimes you're going to find that a cheap mic is the best option to go. That's why I don't have a rule to what mic you should buy. But you must understand something. The way this is built, the way it's constructed, it creates a frequency response to it. This mic is not reproducing my voice exactly how my voice it is. Some information is lost. So when you buy a mic, you must check this information too. What's the frequency response? What does that mean? How much of all the frequencies the mic listens to? Because when you buy, for example, a Beta 52 mic, and you look at the chart, you're going to see that he doesn't listen above 10K or something. And sometimes you really want that because you want to record a floor tone, and you have a freaking ride there banging, and you're like, dude, I just don't want those excessive highs. So you start seeing the picture that the mic that you need is not necessarily the mic that covers all the spectrum even. It's just depending on the application. So I wanted us to take us a couple of concepts and understand this, that mics are used in a specific way, and that they are built so you can play with the properties of sound and achieve the results you want. And that I want you to take home one concept, which is frequency response. Remember it, read it, search it. Frequency response. Every mic has this. You must see this. Okay? So, wrapping it up, I want to tell you a couple of myths, and I'm not telling you that this is the truth, I'm just saying that this is my experience. Some myths versus my experience. More expensive equals better. We already talked about it, and if you cannot read there from there, but I wrote Poly by Nirvana, like remember it, because it's a great example, don't forget. Condenser mics are better than dynamic mics. No, not really. They're just different. It's kind of like saying that an Adviorka is better than a как сказать? Например. So, the other thing I don't like when I speak with people sometimes, this is very rare, only mediocre people do this, but you do hear it, it's like, oh yeah, я нашел мои микрофоны, которые мне нравятся, и все круто, и мне не нужно экспериментировать больше, дальше. Нет. We need to innovate, learn, and experiment all the time. I run sessions all the time in the studio, and I still change my setup all the time, because maybe I will achieve a better result. That's a very funny one, the next one I wanted to talk about. SM57s are not top quality. I used to think like that. And I once watched the Joe Baresi talk that you may have seen, some of you, and I was mind blown like to see how many 57s he was dropping all the way. And you must understand that there are many kinds of SM57s. And the ones that are made in America and that are called Unidyne are the ones you should buy, because they're really sweet, they're worth it. They're awesome mics, yeah, and same with SM58s, they're really serious mics. It's just that, yeah, there is a whole range of them, so check it out, but they're really sweet. It's not true that they're not top-notch. Another thing, older mics are better. Well, look, I'm really 0% into the fetishism of vintage, you know. I'm a very modern guy, and of course I recognize that old stuff had a better manufacturing practice. You follow me there? Old stuff was manufactured better, was built better. But hey, we have progressed a lot, man, too. And there are very interesting technologies out there, so don't be fooled by this. Maybe it's worth buying an expensive new mic too. It's not only, you should not only think about going backwards all the time. And guys, how many of you, if I say the word impedance, how many of you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so there is an important topic that I think it's hard to introduce here, but you know, your mic is connected to a preamp, and that preamp has a possibility to change a parameter that one day in your life you will learn about. This is super important too. You must understand what is the impedance of your preamp, because you can buy a super awesome mic and then your preamp cannot match the impedance of it, and you lose the potential of your mic. I'm telling you, I did this personally in the studio. I used to work in Budapest. I recorded the same drum set. I put the same drum kit, one mic, and changed the impedance in the preamps, and it was mind blowing. So that's an important topic. And I wrote again Vashna, so it's really Vashna. Another myth is that all mics can be fixed. Guys, you should treat mics like babies, really. Because once they're broken, unless you live in Germany or in the USA, most likely you will not be able to fix them. And so, mics are designed for different purposes. Take this home. Engineers must experiment. It's so important, obvious. Mics will react different to different sources, so you need a lot of them, really. There is no cheap way to make a great studio, sadly. A studio is a laboratory of sound. A home studio is another conversation, and we can talk about it in the discussion back there. But a recording studio is a laboratory of sound. And that's why in a laboratory of sound, just like in the laboratory of chemistry, you need a lot of special tools in the studio as well. Read frequency response charts. I put it very big there, because this will tell you which mic you should use for what, and you should use your imagination. You know, you have to think like chess, like schachmatte. You know, you have to think about where is the next step where you're going to be when you're making a sound recording. So today I'm recording drums, but I know that tomorrow I'm going to compress those drums, and then that all the high end is going to blow up. So maybe I should use a mic that cuts high end a little bit, because for a topic that I really cannot talk about right now, it's better to do your cuts and boosts in analog world before you enter to the digital world. But that's a fact. We can talk about it longly, but that's another conversation. The other thing is that you need to know as well is that if I speak loud here, or if I speak a little bit less loud, the microphone changes the frequency response too. So frequency response is SPL, sound pressure level dependent. So you need to consider these two. You need to read the specs. That's basically what I'm trying to say there. And, whoa, one day, I hope you can understand this. I went to a talk here in Moscow, and somebody told me something that blew my mind. And I researched it, and it's very important. Sorry, am I okay with time?
Almost over.
Yeah, cool. I will talk that to you on the side, because it's a complicated one. I don't want to get complicated right now. So I want to open to questions here. Yes.
Hi Leo, first of all, thank you very much for coming.
Yes, thanks.
Nice, interesting story. So my question is more about mic preamps.
Yeah.
Maybe you can call your top 5 models, because mine is NIF.
Yes.
Almost all NIFs, because for
Great.
me it's absolutely genius boxes.
It's absolutely true.
And mainly box is my second choice.
Yes.
What is your top 5 or top
Okay.
10?
Look, I can say Rupert Neve also did some preamps with Focusrite that are really amazing. So, wait, I'm answering that. Yes. Yeah, sure. Bring it in.
Your point about preamps, another preamp not included in some audio interface, is strong needed, or
Maybe I
you
should
may use something that built in your
Okay.
audio Fox.
Let me answer that question first, like a list quickly, and then I go to you. Okay? So I would say Focusrite ISA. It's a really nice mic. It's a really nice preamp. I like the Universal Audio 1176, the old ones. The new ones are not nice. I love Neve 1073s, obviously. They're just perfect. And I'm a Neve guy as well, so I think that's my top 3 together with the preamps of my console, because I like to combine them both.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah, sure. So, your question again, tell me again.
Is it strongly needed to have to buy another preamp for mic
In the home
instead
studio?
of some included preamps in all the interfaces?
What's the situation? It's your home?
Yeah.
Look, depends. Do you want to release that material without going to the recording studio, or you want to go to the recording studio in a point? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Tell both.
Okay, look, I have an MBox 2 at home. That's my sound card. Because I have a $15,000 setup in my studio. So, I mean, for me, what helps me is that I just need that stuff to record some demos quickly at home, and then I don't need a preamp for that at all. Why would I, if I'm not going to release that? If you have the budget to, you know, there is something I absolutely did not mention here that is one of the main points of my talk, which are your cables. Because that's the other thing, you know, to answer your question, the answer is, if you can, yes, but make sure you have great cables, because then you're going to connect your super awesome preamp through a shitty cable, and it's kind of like having a water treatment plant and running everything through dirty tubes. So my answer to you is, you have two options. Either you run straight into your sound card and you just use this as a reference, or you buy extremely great cables, and then you will benefit from having a preamp at home. That answer your question? Yeah? Maybe. Another question?
You said that dynamic mics take more pressure levels.
Yes.
Does it mean that it's better to record drums by dynamic mics?
You need to know your drummer. That's the answer I would give you. Definitely, I mean, if your session is like, I got a metal guy coming here and he blasts that drum kit like a monster and I have never really met him before, my safe bet will be to drop a dynamic mic on the snare. My drummer of my band is a jazz drummer. He hits very hard too, but he's a jazz drummer, and I mic him with a condenser mic because I want the ghost notes to be there, to be very clear. So it really depends, but when you're working in a studio commercially and you record a lot of people that you don't know, you have to make safe bets sometimes, and that's a safe bet. Dynamic mic, heavy sound pressure level, cool. And there is an infinite world of things we could talk about today, but do you have any other questions, by the way, at this point? So, takeaway messages for you to take home. Cables are uber important. Don't buy anything expensive if you have shitty cables, basically, because you're damaging your own pocket by spending money in something that it's just not going to work. Think about it, okay? Secondly, preamps have parameters that you need to learn about, because this also affects how your mic works. Thirdly, you need a lot of kinds of mics. For your home studio, no, but for a recording studio, yeah. And expensive doesn't mean better. If you experiment, you will have a lot of fun and learn that it's not necessarily true. Yeah.
Большое спасибо. Thanks,